Hey, everybody. Welcome to week 240. This is going to be huge. I mean, huge. Bigger than anything anybody's ever talked about. Yeah, we're going to be talking about, hey, so we got a new sheriff in town in the White House, and there's going to be a whole lot of change going on. And it was kind of breakneck speed. If you were watching any of it Monday night, I was just kind of amazed because I was going to watch football. I couldn't watch football because it was just too entertaining. So anyway, and Jack, he got a little bite of eat to eat. That's good. He's still in his house because the snow was so thick here in Charlotte. I mean, I had at least a thousandth of an inch. Stuck in a snowdrift in my front yard. I don't know. I was hoping that somebody would airlift me some bread, milk, and eggs so that I could have some French toast. Fortunately, we had done a Costco run before, so we had toilet paper, so that's a good thing. But anyway, I mean, it's so crazy down here. But we did have 7 inches or close to it in Myrtle Beach, believe it or not, in our office out there. I mean, that's just some crazy time. So, Adam, before we tee up Jack, because he said he has 11 pages of executive orders. Like, what the heck does this mean? So that'd be really good to have kind of an overview of some of that, and then you guys can hit us in the chat. You can harass us. Let's try to keep this as apolitical as possible. I know this is kind of a firebrand. I know, I get it. But let's focus on like, what does this mean versus the hyperbole of, you know, the two extremes. He's not Jesus Christ. He's not Hitler. Like, come on. Let's get down to the meat of what is this going to mean for us as business owners. So Adam, any thoughts before we unleash Jack?
Um, two, I think two or three things that, I think without without getting, it's like so freaking hard to say without being political. It's just more like, Jack and I a lot of times have trouble being the smartest people in a room. It's hard to tamp that down. You know, so I think my opening statement would be before everybody gets excited, think about the totality of the problem and what a fair solution might look like. And I'll take the EV tax credit and, weave it all together, one shot. So, you know, it at face value, you're like, yeah, why would I, why should somebody get money for, free choice? Why should somebody get money for something? The car ought to, the EV ought to stand on its own, and as a EV driver myself, the $7,500 was a nice gift, but it did not influence my purchasing decision. I'm not giving the money back, Gary, but it did not influence my purchasing decision. What influenced my purchasing decision is that not only does Adam not want to be dependent upon foreign oil, Adam wants to be dependent on no oil, at least in terms of the gas prices. So I drive the EV because I like sticking it to the man, so that's that's my 2 cents on the subject itself. But in terms of the leveling of the playing field, you know, there the thing where I'm like, could we start having some comprehensive thought though and fairness in the discussion versus, you know, just one little element. So, if you think about like the flat tax as an example, flat tax, we need a flat tax is fair. No poor person ever says, I'd like a flat tax, Jack. it's always a really wealthy person who says, "I'd like a flat tax because I want my taxes lowered." You know, to the low guy, like you don't hear anybody on the low end saying, "You know what, you're right, we should come up." You know, right? So the EV tax credit is somewhat like that because if you're looking at leveling the playing field, okay, then let's really level the playing field. Um, Tesla has not paid taxes ever. Ford Motor Company has. Um, Ford Motor Company is lauded for bringing back manufacturing to Michigan, which Trump won, which is also a union state. Teslas are not manufactured in union states. So I have a labor differential that exists that is in Ford's cost structure that is not in Tesla's cost structure. I don't see Tesla raising their hand to say, hey, those $1 billion in tax credits that all our drivers got, back from the days, we're just going to go ahead and make y'all whole, on that, right? So it's like, look, if you're going to, the problem is not that developing parity with, in other words, it's more like, I actually agree with removing the EV tax credit incentive personally, because I actually think that the old way that they did it made more sense, which is, hey, we're going to help a new vehicle get off the ground temporarily by subsidizing the first 100,000 off the production line. But after that, you clearly can stand on your own. That made a lot of sense to me. That's what tax credits are meant to be used for. A semi-permanent subsidy for people that don't really need it is dumb. We should not do that. So I actually agree with the position. What I don't agree with is a statement of like, this will level the playing field, because you're not leveling the playing field unless you look at all those other items, at the same time. And kind of the same thing applies with drill baby drill. It's like, okay, that's awesome. 75% of the US's gas actually comes from the US already. So you're talking about closing the 25%. And at the same time, guess where it's cheaper to produce gas, Jack? On a federal lease, because they're freaking cheaper than private land. So of course I want to drill, baby, drill. It's cheaper. So it's like, we're not talking about saying, yeah, we're going to drill, baby, drill. And by the way, we're actually going to charge a competitive rate, for those oil and gas leases instead of what the federal specified amount is. So I hope they do something a little bit more, I hope, I actually like that Musk and Trump are like fighting now, that because I think that's actually going to be, I think if you're going to do something with the Doge, let's really do it. Like let's really do it, because I actually do think, hey, there's a lot of smart minds that want to be a part of that actually could do some good. If anybody's actually willing to go through the pain of the good that they're probably going to suggest. So all that said, the couple things that I've got my eye on in particular, are immigration, and in particular, the rescission of birthright, or the executive order saying we want to rescind birthright citizenship, just because that's going to impact, people who are here legally, but on immigration visa statuses. So if I've got like, I don't know, like, is that guy going to go home? Is he going to stay here? I don't know what that guy's going to do. I don't know. Like, in other words, his incentive to stay because his kid would get U.S. citizenship is now gone. If it goes anywhere, potentially. So I don't know. I don't know about that one. And at the same time, if you all of a sudden remove a bunch of people from the workforce because they got deported, what does that mean? For cost structure and labor and all that kind of stuff. That's one. The tariffs are another, just simply because you know, we have a lot of clients that either directly or indirectly import stuff, that will have to pay more for the stuff, at some level, if they end up going through. I actually like the way that the tariff thing was written because it was really focused more on like, hey, let's just do an examination of what we've already got in place to see if it's being enforced. And what in particular I really liked was they went after the whole tariff loophole, which is, sort of the Superman 3 philosophy of importing goods is if I import things below $800, there's no tariff. Guess what? Guess what the price is of most of the shit that I'm buying off Amazon is, Jack.
Yeah.
So I liked, I thought, good for you. Like that's actually, that's good that somebody's putting some eyes, on that. Because what I've heard is like, a lot of goods come over that nobody even knows about, because they're in that de minimis rule. And then the last one that I think I've got my eye on is the whole stuff around where we may choose to not participate in the global um, minimum tax thing that Treasury Secretary Yellen negotiated, which for the wonky people in the room, what that was designed to do. Like I get the point of like, like part of me with my flying my "Don't tread on me" flag would say I don't want to sign up for anybody telling me what I can tax and what I can't tax. You can go straight to hell. I get that side of the equation. But what that was intended to do from the US's perspective is that we're already above 15%, in terms of our tax rate. So what that was designed to do was to stop companies like Apple from headquartering in Ireland that's got a lower tax rate. So basically what they're trying to do is to try to eradicate the whole race to the bottom of where am I going to put my corporate headquarters. I think one of the benefits of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was done under Trump, is he actually did a good thing by fixing a lot of that problem, not by saying, there's an effective minimum tax. What he did do is he said, hey, if you've got foreign assets, part of them are going to be subject to tax in the US. So that actually solved a lot of the Apple is headquartering in Ireland problem and did a good job of raising some revenue for the US. I think the unintended consequence of screw you on your corporate minimum tax, as a statement is that, going back to Tesla and Ford in the beginning, there's a lot of Fortune 100 companies that don't pay tax and haven't for years, including in our own backyard. And I don't know, like as a taxpayer. So if you just look at the U.S. tax system as a whole, the percentage of revenue that's derived from us as individuals is significantly higher as a percentage of revenue than it used to be. So if all else being equal, I want to give the taxpayer a break. Well, I'm the taxpayer, but if I'm not going to make any cuts, I've only got a couple other sources. That's, tariffs, that could be a source, or corporations, that could be a source. So the unintended consequence of this minimum tax, in theory would have been all those domestic corporations like Duke Energy in our own backyard that have been paying no tax. Now you're going to have to pay 15%, which to me, I don't think I have a problem with, because I feel like, again, if I just use Duke Energy as an example and Tesla, I will be dead before they have we're eventually going to have to pay those taxes, Gary. We're accounting for them, we're accruing for them, They're right. On their financial statements, they're reporting profit to the US stock exchange. And part of that profit includes a provision for future taxes they may have to pay. The problem is it'll be 50 freaking years before I'll be dead. Like, doesn't it seem to make more sense to at least sort of limit the time window, associated with that? So I think that's the other one that I've got my eye on. It's like, okay, that, I can get, I don't want to be tied into any sort of global tax regime. Makes sense to me. But are we going to do anything about the concept of a corporate minimum tax, at some level, as a potential fairness thing, as a revenue raiser. So I would like to see, because I think there's enough of a populism wing of the Republican Party now that I could see them saying, "Oh, I got a solution," to help pay for this. So that's where I've got some optimism. And even Elon Musk. I mean, like, he's been a beneficiary of the fact that Tesla has paid no tax, and at the same time, he famously uh, did a poll on Twitter that said, "How much tax should I pay by harvesting some unrealized gains?" And then he did it, and he paid it. So, like, I think at that level, they all get something's got to change at the super rich um, and corporate level. So I could see some changes happening there. That would be net good revenue raisers, because again, if you look at, like, if you just look at the pattern of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, yes, corporations got a tax break down to 21% from 35%. That was needed, to at least get the playing field closer with foreign jurisdictions. And then they offset it by saying, "Hey, all you knuckleheads been hiding stuff overseas? Nay, nay, not anymore." I'm hopeful, from that standpoint. And with that, you heard enough from me at this point.
So before we move on, I'm just curious, if you were a betting man, what percentage likelihood do you see of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act being ratified?
Oh, I think if I was a betting man, I feel like it's going to be 100%, because it's the laziest answer with the least controversy. It's just,
Yeah.
keep it rolling.
So, speaking of lazy, this is an interesting tidbit before I throw the mic over to Jack. I had a conversation with a wealthy business owner yesterday, and this wealthy business owner was very excited about Trump being put in office. And this wealthy business owner was extremely excited about the whole Doge thing. And I think, as a business owner, whether you're left, right, or center, I think we can all agree we got to stop this wasteful spending, because there's a lot of it. Like, we all know, like, it's just been gathering for a long time. Both sides have contributed. So this person went on to they went onto the government website to volunteer their time. And the requirements were, you're going to work for free. They were cool with that. But the other requirement was 60 hours a week minimum for free. Because we were also talking about, man, can you imagine? I know somebody that ran the Musk Tesla Model 3 plant, engineer, and after a couple of years working under Elon, his health and his family, everything was failing, because, like, he said it was routine that he would leave the plant. He'd get there at 7 in the morning or whatever. He was leaving the plant at 2:30 in the morning to go get a little bit of shut eye, and he'd get a call from Elon. I'm like, and I worked for a CEO that was kind of like that. She got 3.5 hours of sleep, and she still does. And we were talking about, like, man, I don't know how that's sustainable for the people around him. I don't know how they do it. Um, it's kind of an amazing thing. So anyway, if you want to volunteer for Doge, God bless you. I hope you got some deep pockets and you're willing to work 60 hours a week. So, Jack, take us through this flurry of executive orders, which you said is 11 pages.
Yes. So a couple of initial thoughts. First of all, when I was reading that text you sent to me about I was actually in bed later than I wanted to be the other morning with next to my dog that was keeping me warm. So it was hard to get out of bed. But I was thinking about how it would be wonderful to be able to function on only a few hours of sleep. I'd get a lot more done. And then to give you a few updates, so regarding the weather, as you said, I had the privilege and opportunity for a daddy-daughter date in Denver to Copper Mountain to my sister-in-law's
Oh,
place, and
yeah.
it snowed a lot. It was -15 at the top of the mountain, which we didn't go up there because they're all double diamonds. Um, we only did single diamonds, and then we did a double diamond by accident because my nephew led us to there on purpose, and then there was no other way down. So
Bad.
yes, we had a little discussion with him about that. But then, that actually motivated us to go through trees and other things that hopefully mom will never find out or listen to this video recording. So yes, there is. Oh, and then my fun on Frontier, trying that out, actually went well. And
Oh,
so yeah, I mean it's okay. It was like $150 less per ticket. So and it was a 3-hour ride. It was okay. Actually on the ride back as we were descending. So at that point where they pull back the engines and the airplane becomes a somewhat glider as you're descending very
yeah.
slowly. At that moment, the dad sitting next to me and his wife and 2 kids across from us were having some stomach issues. So the son started having stomach
Oh,
issues, which then chain reacted to the daughter. And then as the
oh
mom was trying to
gosh.
assist, she was starting to feel a little sick.
Oh
And we
gosh. That's
very graciously offered the throw up bags that were in front of our 2 seats to that family, and hoping that it wasn't whatever that is, it the norovirus or whatever it is that
yeah.
transfers pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're like, okay, we're washing our hands as soon as we get out of the airport. So anyway, fun times.
Woo.
So I wish I could do an Alex Trebek impersonation or Will Ferrell's version of it, or Sean Connery or Burt Reynolds from Saturday Night Live, but I
Yeah.
can't. But here are your categories for Double Jeopardy: immigration and U.S. borders, international trade, business, and the economy, climate, energy, and the environment, diversity, transgender rights, and civil rights, federal workers and government structure, healthcare, foreign policy, including national security and America first, nationalism, death penalty and crime, and then the Capitol riot and the 2020 campaign redo is what how they labeled it. So I'm gonna just rapid fire read through this stuff, and then what we may do is maybe in future webinars, maybe focus on a few, these things in a little more detail, and then use whatever time we have left maybe to talk about things that people want to talk about. So
Yeah.
I've been asked a lot about, okay, so what does all this mean? And I said, well, I don't even know what all of this is. So I put together this list and am sharing it. So immigration and U.S. borders actually is one of the longer sections of the presentation. So it starts out by designate an invasion across the southern border of the United States that triggers executive branch powers to take appropriate action to repel, repatriate, or remove any alien engaged in the invasion. Allow U.S. military service members to act as immigration and border enforcement, including the National Guard and Reserve. And then there are some statutes that go back to like 1878 that limit the use of military personnel in domestic law enforcement actions that he's going to look to repeal or modify. Stop refugee arrivals and suspend the U.S. refugee admission program. Redefine birthright citizenship on the 14th Amendment. This has gotten a lot of attention, and there are a lot of state officials, governors, attorney generals that are, in addition to others on the federal level, that basically say, it's the 14th Amendment. You can't do that by executive order. So the Trump order asserts that a child born in the U.S. is not a citizen if the mother does not have legal immigration status or is in the country legally but only temporarily, and the father is not a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident. So the stories of kids of non-citizens flying over U.S. airspace, including like Puerto Rico, being born on an airplane, now becoming a U.S. citizen, they're proposing. I mean, that's obviously an extreme example, but those kind of things, or somebody being here illegally, and then just because you were born in the U.S., that is attempting to be abolished. Prioritize continued construction of the wall and other barriers on the Mexico border. Direct the Attorney General and Homeland Security Secretary to create task forces in all 50 states, a mixture of federal, local, state officials in law enforcement. Give Homeland Security more wide latitude to establish individual state and local law enforcement agencies. So basically giving them more powers on the local and state level. Require collection of DNA samples and fingerprints from immigration detainees. And apparently there's a 2005 federal law, but it doesn't go that far. So looking to modify that. Forbid the so-called catch and release, which allows migrants to remain in the U.S. while awaiting their immigration court proceedings instead of being deported. Let's see, some end so-called parole programs, often referred to as family reunification, that allow family members of of certain citizens and permanent resident immigrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela to come to the U.S. while their visa applications are still pending. Let's see, some other gems. Repeal a Biden order requiring planning for the effects of climate change on world migration patterns. Don't know why that's under immigration in U.S. borders, but it is. And then, I mean, it goes on and on. So let me give you a sampling of the international trade, business, and economy bullet points. Broadly direct all executive agencies to tailor their policies to reduce consumer prices, and that Trump be advised of progress every 30 days. Direct the Treasury and Commerce secretaries to examine causes of U.S. trade deficits, unfair trade practices, and make recommendations, including a global supplemental tariff. I don't know if that that is in place of what Adam was talking about previously, about taxes, tariffs, and things like that. So maybe that's a possibility. Review the U.S. Mexico-Canada agreement with a possible rewrite of NAFTA. And this has also kind of been elevated to a top spot in the news regarding our relationships with Canada and Mexico. And, it's what I hear about that is, okay, yes, America first with respect to utilization of U.S. manufacturers, U.S. manufacturing facilities, but you can't ignore the fact that a lot of our production happens outside of our borders, not just with China. I'm talking about in North America or Central America, South America. So, these are very bold statements. And again, as Gary and Adam said, this is not meant to be political in any way. This is just a list that I found that we're talking about, right? Direct Attorney General and others to deny federal money to sanctuary cities as the administration sees as interfering with federal immigration and enforcement. Okay, that is actually should be up in the other list. Let's go back to business stuff that you guys want to know about. Begin review of U.S. trade dealings with China to consider tariffs. Dealing with the fentanyl issue in the U.S., specifically sourced from Canada, Mexico, and China. Direct the Commerce and Trade Secretaries to consolidate reviews and assessments, meaning that there is, in continuing into discussing kind of how restructuring the federal government, there is a lot of overlap by agencies. Some would say it's purposeful redundancy to make sure there are no things that slip through the cracks. But there is an intentionality in, and I think there was something in the news yesterday, the day before, about how many people are going to get fired Now, it was said in the context of Biden people getting fired. So it was a political statement being made. But I think that, the effect is it's going to overall reduce the size of the federal government regardless. Pause the U.S. ban on TikTok for 75 days. Suspend participation in a global tax deal, which is what Adam brought up. Bar U.S. government officials from pushing social media companies to combat misinformation and disinformation. Trump says previous efforts infringed on the constitutionality of protected speech rights of American citizens. So if you remember months ago, years ago, that the federal government got involved with some of the social media platforms and what they were putting out there, and censoring that. All right, next category, climate, energy, and the environment. Withdraw the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement, which I'm sure you've heard about on the news. That deals with limiting carbon emissions, and then block transfer of U.S. funds previously obligated to that plan. And so pulling away the money. Declare a national energy emergency. Says this is both symbolic, representing Trump's promise of energy expansion, but also specifically urges federal use of eminent domain and Defense Production Act to commandeer private land and resources to produce goods deemed to be a national necessity. So back to Adam's comment about, okay, which is less expensive, on private land or government-owned land? So why don't we turn private land into government-owned land and then go ahead and drill, right? So compel the Army Corps of Engineers to speed up energy projects, eliminate Biden policies intended to encourage electrical vehicle development and purchases, part of Trump's effort to limit non-fossil fuel energy sectors. So it goes back again to something Adam said. And also, this is one thing that makes my son a little happy, in that he races go-karts competitively that are gas-powered. I recently saw an F1 race and it was all electric vehicles. So I don't know if it was actually F1. It was probably part of that organization, but it was all electrical, and it was very interesting because they go really fast and then they slow down. But the energy that you use to go really fast, it's different driving. So which my son would not be happy with, I don't think, if they started converting racing carts into electrical vehicles. It would make my day a little better, because by the end of the day, I'm just in a fog and have headaches from all the fumes on the track and in the garage. All right, require agencies within 30 days to submit budget plans. So again, reining in the cost of government so that there are budgets and then there are reviews of them. If you remember a week ago, 2 weeks ago, we were talking about best practices for businesses. This is very similar to that, which is, okay, set up a budget, but kick the tires of the budget periodically, rather than saying, okay, good enough, let's revisit that in 11, 12, 13 months from now, rather than comparing budget to actual on a periodic basis. So repealing multiple Biden orders regarding climate change, streamline fossil fuel extraction in Alaska, deny U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service request to create an indigenous sacred site within the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. I mean, they've got into the nitty gritty on a lot of these. And then, Gary and I were talking about how, during inauguration day, and, president is signing all kinds of these executive orders and having conversation with reporters in the room and things like that. But I mean, there was, and then also the kind of sometimes President Trump being surprised what was in front of him. He's like, oh, that's a good one, kind of thing. And oh yeah, that sure, why not, kind of thing. And just signing off and then giving the pen to someone in the room, right? So I'm 100% sure that President Trump is not aware of every single thing on this list, in any great detail. Probably the repeal of Biden stuff he's probably very aware of. Re-engage a legal and regulatory battle with California state government over water routes from Sacramento to San Joaquin Delta. That is in response and blame for the lack of water for the wildfires in California. All right, next category, diversity, transgender rights, and civil rights. Give executive branch departments and agencies 60 days to eliminate DEI type programs, including chief diversity officer positions and those kind of things. Repeal Biden era directives on racial and ethnic equity and LGBTQ rights. Require the U.S. government to recognize two genders only, male and female, on passports, visas, global entry cards, and other forms and documents in the federal program. Mandate that all federal civil rights law and labor laws be interpreted and enforced with the understanding that sex is not a synonym for and does not include the concept of gender identity. A bunch of other repealing or dissolving policies regarding LGBTQ persons. Promote gender ideology, or forbid federal money from being used to promote gender ideology. And again, back to only males and females. Federal workers and government structure. This is another category. Establish the Department of Government Efficiency to be led by Elon Musk, the world's richest man, and is charged with recommending cuts in federal programs and spending. And then it goes into establishing the DOGE team of at least 4 people to work with Musk's operation, freeze federal hiring with exceptions, notably immigration and border enforcement, post and U.S. military jobs, plus a generic exception to maintain essential services. So trying to get rid of the excess on the fringe, but not focus on the core. Block new federal rules and regulations in all agencies where Trump's appointed agency chief is not yet on the job to approve new edicts. So basically, he's saying that no federal agency can make a decision until his appointed person is running the agency. Some would say, well, that's pretty efficient. I mean, if he's going to put his person in there and the person's going to reverse anything, why don't we just put kind of, status quo as things are and don't change anything? I think that ignores a little bit of the things that need change immediately, likely. So just for efficiency purposes, make it easier to fire federal workers, reinstitute an executive order, which was repealed by Biden regarding political and personal support against the current president, but must faithfully implement administrative policies, and that not doing so is failure to do so is grounds for dismissal. So either do your job the way the federal government under Trump wants you to do it as a federal employee, or you may get fired. Federal hiring plan to be put into place, which prioritizes the ideals of our American Republic and preventing the hiring of individuals based on race, sex, or religion, while also blocking those who are unwilling to defend the Constitution or faithfully serve in the executive branch. Let's talk about healthcare. So repeal Biden directives intended to make it easier to enroll in Medicaid services, secure insurance, and pass along lower prescription drug costs. The Trump administration, however, does not actually repeal the Biden era 35-month cap on insulin. So there's some exceptions, but basically making it harder to get into those programs. Repeal Biden orders and directives related to COVID-19, withdraw the U.S. from the World Health Organization, which you've probably heard of on the news as going on, and bringing, taking us out of that because President Trump feels like that we overpay into that organization and we are basically funding it for the most part. And so I have heard that might re-engage in that organization if there's a more fair distribution on costs associated with running that organization. But there are also other issues with respect to what the WHO puts out as information and health information, COVID related and other things related to health. All right, foreign policy, national security, America first. Cancel Biden era sanctions on far right Israeli groups and individuals accused of violence against Palestinians. Biden's order had frozen U.S. assets and barred Americans from dealing with Israelis covered by this order. Direct Secretary of State Marco Rubio to issue guidance to put all State Department programs in line with America First foreign policy. Redesignate various groups as terrorist groups, which were removed from the terrorist group list back in, looks like 2021. Define the membership and establishing operating procedures for the National Security Council. So that's the internal U.S. organization that the National Security Agency. So it's basically our spies. I say that having watched the spy movie yesterday. All right, pause all U.S. foreign development aid pending reviews of efficiencies and consistency with administration aims. Grant 6-month security clearances to certain administration officials whose background checks are pending. The White House counsel determines which aides get the temporary clearance. So apparently there's a backlog with people getting access to sensitive facilities, maybe sensitive areas within the White House or the U.S. Capitol. So they want to give them temporary access. All right, and then nationalism. Restore the name of Mount McKinley in Alaska. William McKinley was the 20th U.S. president who Trump has praised for economic leadership. President Obama renamed the mountain Denali, which is what the native tribes called it historically. Trump's order did not change the name of the surrounding Denali National Park and Reserve. Required Trump's personal approval of new architectural and design standards for federal buildings. So the president can ensure federal structures respect regional, traditional, classical architectural heritage in order to uplift and beautify public spaces and ennoble. I guess that means become noble, or I've never used that word in my life, but I may now add it to my vocabulary.
You don't watch The Simpsons enough.
Oh.
It's actually at the I think it's at the base of the Jebediah Springfield Monument, and ennobled spirit is something. That was a great Starbucks gift card, by the way. What's at the base of the Jebediah Springfield Monument? Simpsons.
If it wasn't there, you wouldn't know either. Okay,
I actually wouldn't know that word unless it'd been the subject of several Simpsons episodes.
Okay. All right. This one's interesting. Order that U.S. flags always be flown at full staff on Inauguration Day. It was to countermand Biden's traditional 30-day order lowering flags as a mourning tribute to former President Carter, who died in December of 24, right? Trump's order returned flags on federal installations to half staff on January 21st through the end of the Carter mourning period. Okay. Death penalty and crime. Direct the Attorney General to explore whether 37 federal prisoners who had death sentences commuted to life imprisonment by Biden can be charged and tried with capital crimes in state courts. That one, okay, is that double jeopardy? I mean, it's so I don't want to get into all of that about who can do what and who is countermanding, the other person, and because we could spend a lot of time talking about presidential pardons and commutation of sentences and who did the bad thing first and everything else. All right, direct the Attorney General to take all necessary and lawful action to supply states with adequate drugs to carry out lethal injections. Reversal of the U.S. Supreme Court precedents that limit application of the death penalty, and to encourage state attorneys general and district attorneys to pursue the death penalty in all possible cases. All right, and then the last category is the Capitol riot. Commute sentences and grant full pardons to hundreds of individuals convicted or still being prosecuted for their roles in the 21 attacks. We've heard a lot about that on the news. Order the Attorney General and others to review all agencies' investigative enforcement actions during Biden's tenure to identify what Trump describes as weaponization of the federal government against his supporters. So reviewing the prosecutions and everything else of himself, his family, and his supporters. Okay, direct the U.S. government to investigate dealings with social media platforms during Biden's tenure and make recommendations for appropriate remedial actions there's a response to what Trump frames as censorship. Revoke the security clearances of 50 people Trump accuses of aiding Biden's 2020 campaign via their collective public statement about a laptop that belonged to Biden's son, Hunter Biden. And then there's some names that you would recognize on that list. Direct the Director of National Intelligence and the CIA Director to submit reports within 90 days for disciplinary actions and how to prevent the intelligence community or anyone who works for or within it from inappropriately influencing domestic elections. So, the list, and there's more to the list, but it is a lot of it is not really a surprise to me and others. I mean, these are things that he's been talking about for a while now, some of them, most of them. And so but the question still remains, what is the extent of any president's executive power to be able to do these things regardless? And then, it as a adjunct to that, what if there is a question whether or not it is enforceable, what do the enforcement agencies do in the meantime? Do they, even though, I mean, things like, okay, well, now there's this executive order that says if you don't do what you're told by your bosses under the Trump administration, you're going to get fired. Yeah, okay. First of all, is that enforceable? And then second of all, what do you do when you're that person that has to make a decision, or you're that supervisor that has to go and implement the executive order, or any policies that were in place that now might be deemed invalid, or the other way around, that are now new policies of enforcement of certain things. So it's a very confusing time. And I don't know if it was purposeful that let's throw all this out there as much as possible and then see what sticks. And then we can deal with the things that don't stick appropriately, rather than rolling these things out on, a timed out basis. So it isn't all out there at the same time. I go back to things that we've discussed in the past about, can these things really be enforced practically? Okay, so you have to have people and you have to have money to do these things. And so is that even practical based on the staffing that these agencies have? Is it possible based on what he looks to amp up, which is the collaboration between federal, state, and local agencies on law enforcement? Someone has to pay for that. And you better believe that local and state governments are not going to put out their own money in relation to that. And so, they're going to say, okay, well, if you're making us do this, then you got to pay for it, because, someone has to pay for the gas in our patrol cars to go do what you are asking us to do on a local level under federal law, because you're deputizing us for those things. So again, not a political statement, but just a statement of how practical is this, and how is this going to be enforced from manpower, person power, and financing perspective.
So speaking of power, I heard Mr. Wonderful this morning on a business news channel that I like listening to. And he was talking about all this AI and all these data centers and $500 billion pledged and whatever. And he said, what a lot of people don't understand is, one of these AI data centers requires a gigabyte of power, which, what is that? And he said it powers 1 million homes. 1 million homes. To be able to supply enough electricity, which our grid already is at kind of tapped, a nuclear power plant that can do that is $50 billion, and it'll be 17 years away. Like, oh, wow, okay. And he said to do the same thing would be natural gas. It's $1 billion versus 50 billion for 1 gigabyte of power. And there were only 4 states in the US that could actually do it. Oh, a gigawatt. Yeah, I'm sorry. I said gigabyte. Sorry. Thank you, Donnie. Yeah, you can speak to this, Donnie. This is your gig. But he said that there were like only 4 states, and I think they were like Texas. I'm wanting to say he said West Virginia, I think, one of the Dakotas. I don't know what the other one was. Yeah, like Donnie, I'm glad you're on here. Anything that you can add to this? Like, what do you think about? Because these and the takeaway from Mr. Wonderful was, hey, if you're in one of those states where it's like, oh, hey, this is going to be great, big data center, blah blah blah, your electricity bills are going to go up because of all this that's going to get sucked in to these data centers. Now, I know a group out in California that they do these humongous generators. They're diesel powered generators for backup power, um, for these data centers. Like these generators are multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment. That's just interesting. So, from Donnie, yes, these facilities take a tremendous amount of power that we currently do not have the capacity for. Same goes for EV charging stations, um, which is very interesting. And I don't remember the name of the guy or even his role. He's a nominee, I guess, for one of his Trump's cabinet positions, but he was being grilled by Congress, and there was grandstanding on both sides, blah blah blah. But he said, in reference to China, he said, "What we have is not an arms race; we have an energy race." And I think he said that they were putting online 100 coal-fired power plants a month or something like that. I mean, it was something that blew my mind. Um, so I think that is kind of a reality of what we're facing here. That is actually a concern that I've got on the EV side because I'm very tempted to do it. Adam keeps like, do it, do it. And I'm like, my wife's like, are you nuts? Because I was railing against like, I don't want somebody to be able to turn off my car, lock me out of my own car, monitor, did I go a mile over the speed limit or not? Like, not that I would do that, but so Bruce weighs in on this. He says these centers will be 24/7, 365, always at peak, unlike much other consumption that residential or industrial has. So
Yeah, true.
yeah.
Say, I mean, and to opine on that, I mean, that's what you end up doing with the car anyway, is you're plugging it in at non-peak hours in your 110 outlet, or even if you get a charger and up the amperage, it's still pulling at your house voltage level. So you're not, it's not a massive tax, relative to what they're talking about, these data centers. But yeah, to your point, Gary, I mean, that's why Bill Gates created his own nuclear power company and is in the process of restoring 3 Mile Island.
Oh, interesting. I did not know.
Yeah, to bring that reactor back online, because that is there's been a lot of discussion around Greenpeace's biggest mistake ever was protesting nuclear power because it resulted in more coal and gas with energy demand going up. I mean, they should have said, "Hell yeah, how do we get on board with nuclear power? This stuff's fabulous." Which I think is also probably the right answer. So
I will tell you, I will give away a coffee card if anyone other than Adam can tell me the amount and the measurement of the power needed to bring Marty McFly back to the future.
Oh.
Because when you were talking about
gigawatts,
gigabytes, I was like, wait a minute, that's not the right measurement.
Yeah, no, I was wrong. One something gigawatts.
You need a little more precision than that.
There is a.
That's right.
Will says 1.21.
Yep.
Gigawatts. Right,
And
Giga?
Steve said
Yeah.
321 giga.
Yeah,
Is
I don't know
Giga
what the
even a
the only thing
translation.
that can generate that is a bolt of lightning, Jack. A bolt of lightning, and there's no way to predict whether there'll be a bolt of lightning.
I know, because that's what I was thinking actually, which was, okay, if we don't get our stuff together with all this Electra stuff, we're gonna have to try to, basically put lightning rods on all of our houses to power up our electric cars and pray for
Exactly.
storms.
Hey, I know we're hitting the top of the hour. If anybody has a question to stump the chumps, just hit us. Um, speech to text. All right, cool. Also, put this on your calendar. April the 3rd, 4/3, 2025. It is the 250th week anniversary of this crazy webinar. And we will be doing it again. And I think that the Dung Kings may have to get their uniforms back out of the closet. But yeah, so we will be back at the Hamilton in the karaoke lounge, the way it's looking. So stay tuned on that, but just mark off your calendar for that morning and come and join us. That was a lot. The last two have been a ton of fun. So I don't know if anybody got educated, but we had a lot of fun and we had good food. And some of it
Can we
wasn't
call
even
it the
that good.
lair, the Duncan's lair for us?
Oh, the lair. I
The
like that.
lair, yeah.
Yeah, the
All right,
lair.
think
Yeah.
about it. Maybe we'll take a vote on
Okay.
what we want to call the Hamilton for our use.
Yeah. The last time that we called anything the lair was at our fraternity house at Kansas State, Beta Theta Pi. So we did have a lair. It is not someplace that you really wanted to go into.
Okay, we'll think of something else.
But the lair, I mean, everybody deserves some redemption. So maybe that name needs to
You know
be
why?
redeemed in
Okay,
my
well,
mind.
the reason why that came up is because apparently I saw on Facebook a video of Airwolf, the 80s helicopter,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
the mountain that they hid the helicopter in was called the Lair. So maybe that's why it was on my
Ah,
mind. Right, Adam? Remember that one? Yeah.
I do. I didn't get that big into that one though. No, I was more. I don't know. Like it never. I never got invested. I was more of an A-Team Knight Rider um, type guy.
Okay.
I think I got to tell you before we pop off here. I think Donnie, he did say 1 point something gigawatts, and then he's like he was trying to do speech to text, and he did have some really like he corrected me and said gigawatts instead of gigabytes. So I think Donnie deserves that. I think Will, if he nailed it at 1.21, that's worthy, man. I think
All
that's
right.
worthy.
I'll send coffee cards to both of you. That is worthy.
That's good. All right. Hey, next week. By the way, if you came on late or had to pop off, BGW CPA YouTube channel, same way with Shoemaker Law, they've got their own YouTube channel. Next week, I think what we're going to do is have a special guest on, like, hey, what does this mean? I think it may be Austin Palmer from Destination Wealth. Just thinking. That's a possibility on, hey, what does this mean for the stock market and what all these changes likely mean? Where should I be? Not that you're going to get any investment advice here, but trends, right? And what could it possibly mean? So join us next week for 241. All right, guys, have a wonderful day. See you
Thanks,
on
guys.
signing off.
Thank you.
See
All
ya.
right, see you guys.